Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome in another episode of Mata Dua. Back to me, Fransisca Octaviani, so I will lead discussion. This morning, we will be discussing about book review, Alternative to Capitalism, that contains dialogue between two economics. It explains their economy model and submit reaction to the other party. Robin Hahnel comes with his participatory economy concept, while Erik Olin Wright supports socialist utopian. Today, we will have Zenda and Yuna speaking on Robin's side, and Melly and Hans for Erik Wright's side. Without further ado, let's welcome to other guests for this morning, Zenda and Meliyani. Hi, please Zenda.
Thank you for the opportunity given to me, Siska. Let me explain about participatory economy. Participatory economy, often abbreviated as PARECON, is an economic system based on participatory decision-making as a primary economic mechanism for allocating factors of production and guiding production in society. Participatory economy is a form of socialism and decentralized economic planning that involves common ownership, that means of production. This system was proposed as an alternative to contemporary capitalism and was premeditated. This economy model is primarily associated with the suggestion of political theorist Michael Albert and economist Robin Hahnel, who described participatory economics as an anarchist vision of economics. The key values of goals of a participatory economy are defined as self-management, decision-making, say in proportion to the degree one is effective, justice, reward for the effort of personal sacrifice, solidarity, concern for the well-being of others, diversity, the flourishing of a variety of lifestyle and outcomes, efficiency, meeting our goals without wasting our limited time and resources, sustainability, protecting and nurturing our natural environment. The key institutions to achieve those goals are social ownership, democratic worker and consumer councils, jobs balance for empowerment and desirability, compensation based on effort and need, a participatory planning producers. Okay, thank you. I will return to you, Siska. Bye.
This is very interesting. I would like to hear from Melly from the other side. What do you think about the PARECON? Melly is also joining us online from another country from this debate. Meliyani, please welcome.
The idea behind PARECON is self-management. A democratic process sets the rules called a participatory decision-making procedure. There is no boss or stakeholders. Wages are paid based on merits and personal efforts. In theory, PARECON works for everyone, workers, consumers, and producers. Everyone affected by a decision has an equal role in making it. It's not just businesses or government or unions that decide things. Every individual is involved as well. That means people get to follow their passions and use their skills where they are needed. The question, would the PARECON allocate method be sustainable? Critics of the system claim that PARECON allocation system would not be sustainable in our society because it is human nature for people to own more than their personal needs. PARECON principles cannot coexist with capitalism because both methods have entirely different goals and values. PARECON principles are not justifiable in the modern financial world. Despite the sound PARECON values, implementing the model is challenging from a practical standpoint.
Thank you, Melly. Besides Zenda and Melly, we have our colleague with us live at studio. Let me welcome Hans and Yuna. Hi, you two.
Hello.
Let me go to Yuna first. Yuna, what do you think about Melly point of reaction to Parecon?
I think, let me just again summarize this by saying that we have to go back to the initial purpose of elaborating the model of participatory economics, which is to demonstrate concretely that, at least in theory, that the increasing pre-assumption that we must choose between the authoritarian planning and markets is wrong. The participatory model is not to replace capitalism with participatory socialists, but it is to show that another, more equitable model is possible. It is also a coherent answer to how a full-fledged equitable cooperation model could function. But to say further how to transition from this destructive economy of competitions and greed to the equitable cooperations of economics, that's another different story, and of course a more difficult one.
Okay, Yuna. And Hans, you are with Meli's side, so more skewed to the utopian. Could you explain on that?
Okay. Yeah. So first, let me introduce my socialist utopian alternative to capitalism. So first off, I will introduce the concept of power. So power is the capacity to do things in the world and to produce effects. There are three different types of power: economic, state, and social power. In economics, there are three main types of economic structures that interplay these three types of power. First is capitalism. So this means production, allocation of resources are privately owned, privately managed. Statism, where these things are managed by the state, and socialism, where the allocation of resources are accomplished through social power. In the real world, actual economies are actually complex forms of combinations of these three types. So there are no economic structure where only one form exists or only one is dominant. So a stable equilibria is to have these three economic forms involved in variable combinations. Then what about markets? Now, the framework I'm proposing does not desire to abolish market transactions. However, I do agree that there are two undesirable things in markets. The first is when markets enable some people to have specific power advantages over others. And second, that these advantages create destructive externalities and harms on other people. Now, if those problems are minimized, then market transactions are actually okay. Right? We both share a commitment to democracy and equality. We both believe that people should participate in decisions and that their needs should be met. Now, the problem is that these values are often violated by the unfettered operation of market processes, which creates inequalities and violating democratic principles. Okay? So the problem is not on the market itself, but on the unfettered operation of markets. Now, in your model, where markets are completely abolished, allocation of resources are determined through a planning process, right? That links consumption and production. I argue that in a democratic, egalitarian economy, even beyond capitalism, now the point I'm trying to make is that there is an adjustment mechanism in markets often used to deal with such problems. Okay? So the issue is not really planning versus markets, but the articulation of planning and market mechanism in shaping the way allocation and production and distribution occurs. Now, skepticism is, of course, huge towards socialism because the power of capital is huge at the moment with capitalism. And so if a socialist power seems to threaten the dominance of capitalism, it would be relentlessly attacked. So democratizing the economy is quite impossible as long as capitalism is still dominant. Right? Karl Marx believed that in the long run, capitalism would destroy itself and would grow increasingly fragile. Over the course of history of anti-capitalist struggle, there are three main logic of transformation. Ruptural transformation. So this is when new institutions try to break free from existing ones. This is the direct confrontation strategy. There is interstitial transformation. So they seek to build new forms of social empowerment where possible, but they do not pose an immediate threat to dominant capitalists. And lastly, there is symbiotic transformation that seeks to expand social empowerment while still achieving an institutional configuration of a well-functioning capitalism. In practice, ruptural strategies seems to be more prone to result in authoritative statism. Interstitial strategies may improve the lives of people, but they have nowhere succeeded in eroding capitalist power relations. For symbiotic strategies, they have resulted in a more humane capitalism, less poverty, less inequality, less insecurity, but they have done so in ways that still stabilizes capitalism. So, in my personal opinion, the best prospect for the future is an interplay of interstitial and symbiotic strategies with periodic episodes of the ruptural strategies. So such process of transformation would, of course, likely to be opposed by elites because they threaten the interests of capitalists, but they aim at undermining the dominance of capitalism and increase the weight of social power within the hybrid economic ecosystem. So some of these social economy may involve state power while others don't. So hence they sometimes involves pushing against the state and public policy to expand their spaces. So this is my proposed framework. Thank you very much.
Okay, so interesting. Yuna, I understand that you also have argument for what Hans just explained. So what is your points?
Okay. Anyway, I would like to highlight that despite all what has been explained, that these two actually, Erik and Robin, do not exclusively disagree towards each other context. So, in fact, as a matter of fact, they agree on a lot of things. They agree on a lot of process. They only have a different opinions on several implementations part. So I would like to highlight the market as it is the most contentious content part in this dialogue. Now, Erik and Robin do not disagree about the market, but they do disagree on the meaning of economic democracy and economic justice in it. So to respond to the utopian and socialism concepts, Robin raised the dispassionate case against the market, which described the market conditions right now. The labor markets distributes the incomes unfairly to the people, distribute the incomes unfairly to people with different amount of human capitals. So this means when a labor is hired in a labor market, the one with more human capitals, so therefore have more contributions to the generating revenues and also outcomes of the enterprise, will have a higher wages when compared to those who have less human capitals. Now, this is problematic because it means that, for example, a welder and a sweeper will not be rewarded equally despite they work equally hard in an equal unpleasant circumstances, and despite they are making what we call the despite they are making the equal sacrifices, so they are not going to be rewarded equally. Yeah. And the last one is about democracy. And now, when everything else fails, which means that the market cannot be claimed to lead to equitable and also efficient outcome, usually the enthusiasts will fall back onto the claim that free market generates the economic democracies and political democracy as well. That's not also the case in here. As we know that we need to differentiate the concept of economic freedom and also economic democracy. Economic freedom is the freedom to do as you wish with your people and your property, while the economic democracy is about the decision-making power in proportion to the degree one is affected. Now, these two are different, and once we realize the difference of it, we soon realize also that the case that the markets promote economic democracy will soon be unraveled. That's not true, in short. And this also brings us that, as we all know, that unequal economic power will breed the unequal political power. So it means the defense that economic inequality that the markets generate is a virtue is not true.
Okay, I guess that is something to think about. And Hans, what would you say about the key points after hearing from Yuna?
I agree. There are certainly some differences in our judgments, in our thinking, but these disagreements are with a common objective of thinking beyond capitalism. So I would say the conversion of our views is more fundamentals than these disagreements. Now, we both share a common critique to capitalism. We both share shared values and commitment to progressive reforms. Now, maybe I would revisit some themes we have been discussing about to conclude this dialogue. So first, about the markets. We both agree that unfettered markets generate negative externalities and inequalities. We both agree also that the consequences can be mitigated by appropriate countermeasures. Where we differ, I think, is in the belief that markets are harmful to the values of a democratic, egalitarian society, especially on the point on solidarity. Right? So in your point on market transactions, sellers are trying to take advantage of buyers and vice versa. So this stimulates greed and fear, right, while undermining trust and solidarity. Well, I think that the extent to which these motivations occur depends on the specific cultural norms and social relations. So there are markets where there are high level of trust and reciprocity without fear and anxiety associated. So this might be an alien concept to economists, a lot of economists, because they usually believe that market agents are selfish, rational, calculative actors. And in this case, it is reasonable to see why markets can spread antisocial behavior. But I argue that in an economy dominated by democratic and egalitarian values, it would not be this way. So for example, in sports, right? So many argue that sports foster status hierarchies where winners are better than losers. Right? But sports governed by norms of can also be governed by norms of sportsmanship, fair play, camaraderie. So in a participatory economy where people abandon competitive sports altogether, they will also completely abandon markets. But it is also possible that in the context of good cultural norms, the negative effects of competition will be minimal, and people will flourish in the competitive environments. But again, I still acknowledge that antisocial behavior may arise, but allowing space for market processes will still promote some other positive values, and to completely eliminate these processes will harm those positive values. So what positive values are we talking about? To recap, first is convenience, right? So some people may find it reasonable to give up some degree of social costs for convenience. And you seem to quite confident in your point that a participatory economy would not take up a lot of time and effort. But I don't really believe that it will work as smoothly as you imagine. So because to abolish markets altogether means that people would have to plan their future consumptions in a more detailed and careful way instead of letting the market do its job, which is actually a huge waste of time and effort, in my opinion. Second is risk-taking initiative, entrepreneurial spirit. That's what the market allows for. And the importance of trade-offs. So in life, we agree that a lot of what we do affects other people, but it's impossible to actually involve everyone in the decision, right? So there needs to be a distinction between the public and private sector, right? So even if we can magically get everyone involved, we would not want to do this because individual self-directed autonomy is also an important value to our democratic society. So a full proportionality principle would be a restriction to that autonomy. The last point that we discussed is the problem of hybrids, right? Even if we have a full-fledged participatory economy, there will still need to be some adjustment processes, which you agreed. So this is what I meant by saying that real economic systems are actually hybrids of different principles. So, but may I add that market adjustments are not the same as a free market. But these adjustments are critical to coordinating production through supply and demand, through lowering prices, through shifting production. So I do not mean a full-blown market system, but rather an introduction of effective adjustment processes. And then from market exchanges, we can get data to feedback on the current decisions. Now, my approach is to elaborate normative principles and explore a variety of different institutional forms that could help to realize those values without posting an overarching unified system. So even though I do believe, as you have, in using mathematical models, I do believe that too much reliance on those models can create overconfidence that the real world does not show. So there is a tendency of people who construct mathematical models of social processes to treat world complexities as disturbance or noise, right, rather than real problems. And I think, from my understanding, you do not believe in the necessity of markets because your equations tells you so, and this is where we disagree. So in many themes of our dialogue, we actually share similar views on the process of transformation. So I think where we differ mainly is in the question of whether or not in the future a system level rupture would be needed, right? There are situations I would highlight where progressive reforms are completely blocked. So it is quite wishful thinking, I might say, that it is possible to abolish something as complex as capitalism and replacing it with a pure participatory economy. Right? So I still remain skeptical that a systemic rupture in which capitalism is abolished is an alternative. We both agree that this is an unrealistic strategy. So to conclude our discussion, both of us agree that a greater equality is important for people to live more flourishing lives. We also believe that much needs to be done to mitigate the damage of capitalism at this moment. However, I think that these differences, in the end, as of now, does not have real practical implications. I think that the time horizon is still very far for these ideas to actually be implemented. And so I highly doubt actually that any of our beliefs would affect choices that we have today. So in this sense, I think the main thing right now is to just be clear about the fundamental values that we have and our critiques to capitalism, and to be clear on the possibility of realizing those values to a much greater extent, and the practical initiatives that we can undertake today that moves us in that direction.
Okay, that's all the time we have for today. I would like to thank you to our guests, Hans, Yuna, Meliyani, and Zenda for sharing about their insight with us today, and our viewers for tuning in. And before we wrap up, let me leave the quotes. Capitalism is a social system based on the recognition of individual rights, including property rights, in which all property is privately owned. It's very famous context widely applied in recent world, but as we have discussed here, it's not only the one only concept. So join us again for another episode of Mata Dua, and we will discuss another topic. It will be interesting. Until then, have a good time and see you next time. Bye!